Oh yeah.
Two bigger birdies in a row. Then I don't see the trophies. What's your difference? These two cars. The other thing that can she tried to bring him in then he tried to
Hello and okay. Hello and a very good afternoon and welcome back to the Bush Hotel in Carrick-on-Shannon for Ocean FM's coverage of the local elections 2019. Well, after a few hours rest and a chance to look back on all of the drama and excitement from yesterday, we have still some business to sort out here today, and that is the conclusion of the counting of the votes in the Bannamore Municipal District. If you will cast your minds back towards last night, we had three candidates battling it out for two seats, the final two seats in the Bannamore electoral area. And I think it was fairly well taught at that stage that Enda McGloin would definitely be taking one of those two seats that were available. However, the destination of the final seat was one that was always going to be an almighty battle, and it turned out to be the case between Jerry Dolan, an independent candidate based on the outskirts of Drumshanbo towards Bandaglair in that direction, and Pat Gilooly, a first-time candidate for Sinn Féin. They were only separated by 4 votes last night, and early in the morning, the decision was taken by Sinn Féin to call a recount and a recheck on the votes. Well, inside the next half hour or so, we hope to have confirmation of those votes as they come. And maybe just to let you know about what has taken place in that system of the rechecking of the votes, we're joined by Pascal Mooney, who has played a stellar role all throughout the weekend. So, Pascal, if we just maybe recap on what has taken place here today in the Bush Hotel in Carrick-on-Shannon. The council staff came in, and it was a matter of rechecking and going through those votes again, just from the Bandamore Municipal District, everything else wrapped up in Manorhamilton and in Carrick-on-Shannon. So maybe talk us through what the council went at from today. They started off around about lunchtime, 2 o'clock, and what was involved in the rechecking of those votes.
It's usually pretty straightforward, more so than in the natural count sequence that everybody is now used to hearing about and seeing. The first thing that would have happened is that Mary Quinn, the returning officer, would have called in the representatives of the Sinn Féin party who requested the recount, which is their constitutional entitlement. And inevitably, it happens that there would be a legal dimension to it as well. And there was. Sinn Féin have employed their legal advisor who was present. So they then collectively checked the 79 doubtful votes or rejected ballots. These would be ballot papers that, for one reason or another, were not deemed to be admissible into the count itself.
Spoiled votes, as a lot of people would have referred to them in the past.
For example, if you write on it, this is a spoiled vote. If you don't distinguish that you're giving a number one, specifically, for example, 2 number ones, it's rejected. If it's not stamped, which seems to be what happens, which it always amazes me that considering the efficiency of presiding officers across the country in the polling stations, those of you who go in to vote will know that the first thing they do when they identify you, they take the ballot paper and then they stamp it. And sometimes the stamp doesn't come through. In some instances, there might be an indentation on the paper, but it hasn't actually gone through, and that's rejected. So it was clear from early on that there was not going to be any error because these papers had already been checked and double-checked.
And in fairness to the council staff here, under the direction of Mary Quinn, the returning officer, everything was very thorough yesterday. Everything was examined thoroughly throughout the day. Yeah. And even this morning when we were going away and there was only the 4 votes between the 2 respective candidates, we were still fairly confident that there wouldn't be a huge change.
No, and also in the context of the spoiled votes, all of the political parties and none are representatives of all the candidates are present for this. This isn't done behind closed doors. It's done openly and transparently behind the barriers, and representatives of all the candidates are there, and they all agree on all of the papers. So it was it was indicative, let's say, from the outset, as you will know, John, before we left last night, that if there was to be any error, that the error wasn't going to happen with those rejected ballots.
I think it's important as well, Pascal, just to, again, for the benefit of people who would have joined us and be watching our streaming of this particular event, what it really was only going to affect was, I suppose, those 2 seats that had to be filled. What about the candidates that were elected prior to that in the Bandamore Municipal District from an early stage? There was no effect on them.
No, but not necessarily, John. It would apply to all of them, because remember, this was a general recount. And what the recount involves is that the council staff, under the direction of Mary Quinn, they would take the bundles of votes, which are usually wrapped in hundreds, and they would check every ballot individually. They would go back over every one of them and check that they were in order. In other words, that the order of preference was correct.
But still highly unlikely that there would have been any change in the...
Well, you see, the recounts, they can't... Basically, what I would say that Sinn Féin were hoping for and are hoping for is that human error would have meant that, for example, that some of those ballots might not necessarily have been correctly identified in the sequence of preference. There was no bundle of ballots left sitting under a table or anything of that nature, but it can change. And there was a famous experience in Dublin South Central many years ago with Ben Briscoe and one of the Labour TDs, where over a number of days there was only 3 or 4 votes involved, but it actually changed over a period of days. One day it was going to Ben Briscoe, the other day it was going to his opponent, and eventually they got it sorted. Now, what we're saying here is, because there would be a smaller number of votes, is that Sinn Féin are relying on human error to come up with, I think it's 5 votes, John, rather than 4. That the difference is between Jerry Dolan and Pat Galooly, and that's what we're waiting for. And they're absolutely, as you said, they're absolutely meticulous. And we had hoped that maybe they might have made a declaration. The declaration, by the way, will be on the 7th count, which was suspended last night. And to answer your earlier question, or to clarify, this applies to all of the candidates. So if there was any changes, it may not. They're not necessarily looking just for a change between Pat Galooly's votes and Jerry Dolan's votes. They're actually looking at the whole process. And I understand that it might actually have affected one of the elected candidates marginally, and that maybe there was a vote that has been accepted. My understanding is, and this is unofficial, is that the ballot paper was showing 2 number 1s. But I think that they have agreed on it or something of that nature, whether it's been withdrawn or not. But that will all be explained by Mary Quinn when she makes her declaration. So what we're waiting for, effectively, for those of you listening in, is we're waiting for the declaration of the 7th count.
Thank you very much indeed, Cahill. You're very welcome back to the Bush Hotel in Carrick-on-Shannon. And maybe if we could just give you a general recap of what has taken place here so far, and indeed why we are back on this particular Sunday afternoon. It's very much a case of, as you were on the Manorhamilton Municipal District of Leitrim County Council, all 6 county councillors have been returned for another 5 years there. Mary Bohan from Fianna Fáil, her party running mate Justin Warnock, and Sinn Féin councillor Pádraig Fallon. They were all elected on the first count yesterday in Manorhamilton. They were followed by Fine Gael's Frank Dolan, the independent candidate Phelim Gurran, and Glenfarne-based Sean McDermott. So no change there in Manorhamilton. Well, whereas there was a certain degree, maybe of predictability about proceedings in North Leitrim, it was a different story elsewhere in the county. Just to recap on Carrick-on-Shannon before we go on to the events that are taking place here as regards Ballinamore today. In Carrick-on-Shannon, long-serving councillor Sean McGowan from Fianna Fáil and Inda Stenson, an independent candidate, were returned as expected, along with the Carrick-on-Shannon-based councillor Fionnuala Armstrong-Maguire. Thomas Mulligan from Mohill regained a seat that he lost in 2004. The Fine Gael candidate winning out at the expense of another Mohill-based candidate, Sinn Féin's Shada Logan. And the independent councillor Des Guckin was also returned on the 5th count in Carrick-on-Shannon yesterday, while the 6th and final seat in that electoral area was secured by first-time candidate Paddy Farrell, who narrowly defeated one of his running mates from Fianna Fáil, Fintan Cox. Only 4 votes separating them at the end of the count there. So huge drama. But if we thought that was high on drama, what followed next certainly went up a notch or two. On the final count, on the original counts in Ballinamore, from that municipal district, the Fianna Fáil general election candidate Paddy O'Rourke put in a wonderful performance, a record for him in Leitrim, topping the poll, and he was quickly returned along with fellow Fianna Fáil candidate Keelan Ellis. Now, the original Ballinamore counts as they took place also witnessed Ita Reynolds Flynn from Fine Gael and Drumshanbo-based Sinn Féin candidate Brendan Barry securing seats. So at that stage, there was 2 seats left to be filled. Fine Gael's Inda McGloin looked odds-on to secure one of those available seats. While from an early stage yesterday, we were anticipating that there was going to be an almighty battle between the long-term independent councillor Jerry Dolan and a Sinn Féin first-time candidate Pat Galooly. Now, only a handful of votes were separating those 2 respective candidates this morning when Sinn Féin requested a full recount, which resumed a little bit earlier on here this afternoon. Now, as a result of that request by Sinn Féin, we are all back here in the Bush Hotel. Pascal Mooney is joining me, and we are just going to, I suppose, reflect on it for the benefit of people who have just joined us on the FM frequency, Pascal. So what this involves very much, obviously, apart from Jerry Dolan and Pat Galooly, who'd be very much involved here, and it was anticipated last night that Inda McGloin would have been taking one of the seats that was available, and then Pat Galooly and Jerry Dolan would have been involved in what we described as an almighty dogfight for that final seat. Sinn Féin decided at that stage in the morning, round about 3:30 or so this morning, that it was time maybe for a recount, and that is what has been taking place here in Carrick-on-Shannon today. Now, we're speculating at this stage. We still believe that there probably won't be a significant change, and that's due to the fact that the council staff have been so thorough and meticulous here in the way that they've gone through the votes thus far.
I just want to say that it's the constitutional right of any candidate or its representative to call for a recount, and that's precisely what happened in the case of Sinn Féin. There are 5 votes separating Jerry Dolan and Pat Gilooly. We had arrived at the 7th count when the returning officer, Mary Quinn, suspended the count on foot of the request from Sinn Féin. What happened today was that the first order of business was that they checked the 79 doubtful votes that had already been clarified in the presence of all of the candidates and or their representatives yesterday. So it was felt that there wasn't going to be any change there. However, I do understand unofficially that there might have been one ballot paper that has gone to one of the successful candidates that was accepted, having initially been rejected. It's not going to have any material outcome. So essentially what we've been waiting for is, over the last number of hours, the council staff, under the direction of the returning officer, have been checking all of the ballots. They have been bundled in hundreds, and every 100 of the ballots, all of them individually, are being rechecked. So it applies to all of the candidates. There is nobody officially elected because of the recount, even though we went through all of this yesterday and you've outlined those that were likely to be elected and those that have been elected. But officially, they are still in suspension.
There's a real case of deja vu in many ways. So just maybe to summarise it, we don't really expect any huge change as regards the likes of Paddy O'Rourke and Keelan Ellis, who were elected early yesterday. Also, Ida Reynolds-Flynn, the Drumshanbo-based Sinn Féin councillor Brendan Barry as well. We expected in the Bugloin, the way it was looking last night before the recount, was odds on maybe to take the second last seat. And then it was all going to come down between that battle between Jerry Dolan.
Basically, this story this afternoon is about Pat Gilooly and Jerry Dolan. It's not about the other candidates, but because of the manner in which the recount is taking place, it does affect if there's any change. Essentially, John, to put it in a nutshell, what Sinn Féin are hoping for is human error, in that there was somewhere along the way yesterday that there was some mistakes made which would then close the gap between their man and Jerry Dolan. But unofficially, and we don't want to be anticipating or preempting the official declaration, it doesn't look like there's going to be a big, a significant change.
Yeah, that's it. Very much seems to be the word that's going around the Bush Hotel here at the moment, that there won't be a significant change. Let's get some further analysis on this, and we're joined by a former Sligo Leitrim well-known TD, John Ellis. John, thank you indeed for joining us here. And I suppose really from the perspective of the candidates involved, and Keelan, your own brother, would be one of those that we mentioned in the Bannamore area. It has prolonged proceedings, there's no doubt about that, but especially for Jerry Dolan and Pat Gilooly, you can just imagine them coming back in here today and that degree of uncertainty and another day of high drama. It's what election counts are all about in many ways.
Well, I suppose politics is a blood sport when it comes to elections, and nobody knows exactly where they're going until they arrive on the scene. Yeah, it's a tough day for both of them, for both of their families and all their supporters on both sides. But I have to compliment the the returning officer and their staff, because everything yesterday was double checked and some of it was triple checked. And to be fair, they did a tremendous job. And they stayed on until 4 o'clock this morning, anticipating that everything would be finished and there'd be no coming back today. But no, I don't think this is going to change anything at all. And I think that we all know that Jerry Dolan has been a Lazarus politician for years. And I can understand that now.
Many times it was mentioned yesterday about Jerry Dolan that you write him off at his pearl. He's somebody that's never dead and buried when it comes to politics. And once again, he's proved that, it seems, this time round.
There's a very simple answer to that. Jerry Dolan knows 95% of the people in the council area. And Jerry Dolan would arrive to somebody and say, look, give me whatever you can give me. He wouldn't arrive into your door and say that I need a number 1 or I need a number 2. Look at whatever you can do for me, and that's it. And that on top of his core vote is how he survives. And I think he has to be complimented. And I pity for Pat Gilooly, because the first-time candidate everybody saw him as being a dead cert, to put it mildly. And now he ends up getting caught. Because it just tells you we can predict, but the electorate dictate.
Absolutely. And again, the ability of a candidate to be transfer friendly is hugely significant. Pascal, if we can just, I suppose, maybe go back to you, and what has really made this particular battle between Jerry Dolan and Pat Gilooly so intriguing is that there are so many similarities between the two candidates, and no doubt about it, both men would have a huge profile when it comes to agricultural sectors. And as a result of that, the battle was always going to be intense. The similarities were there. They would be, in many ways, canvassing the same ground, networking the same individuals, looking for those votes, looking for to be transfer friendly. So it was always going to be a very close battle between these two candidates, and that was identified from a long way out yesterday.
What I would suggest to you, John, you're absolutely right, but I would suggest to you that there was a distinctive difference in that Jerry Dolan was an independent candidate, whereas Pat Dooley was a branded candidate. And Sinn Féin have not had a good day. And there was obviously a feeling within the electorate, even here in Leitrim, where they've lost 2 seats, that it wasn't going to be Sinn Féin's day. So when it came down to preferences, and that's what we're looking at, remember this is the 7th count. This isn't about number ones or twos, as John has correctly pointed out, where Jerry Dolan has thrived, and that we're looking at people who gave their 5th or 6th preference to Jerry Dolan and didn't give it to Pat Gilooly. There just wasn't any votes for him when it went beyond a 3rd or 4th preference. And as a result, I would suggest to you that was the difference between where Jerry is now and where Pat is.
And maybe if we can throw into the mix as well on this, John Ellis, that one of the candidates whose transfers would have come into play late last night would have been Brendan Barry. And that was intriguing as well, in the sense that Brendan Barry was Drumshanbo based on Jerry Dolan's doorstep, but was also a Sinn Féin candidate. And that was intriguing to watch.
Yeah, but you also want to understand where Brendan Barry's votes came from. It was Caroline Mulvey's transfers that elected Brendan Barry. So that was a pure Sinn Féin vote. But it also elected Ita Reynolds on the same count. And Ita, I think Brendan Barry had a surplus of around 50. Now, when they distributed that surplus, it was neck and neck. Jerry Dolan was picking up from it. But when it came to Ita Reynolds's, there was nothing in that for Pat Gilooly, because that was the vote that had left Sinn Féin entirely and had gone on to others. And it's back to where Pascal said 5, 6, or 7. There'll be some of them 9s and 10s.
Just to pick up on one more point that Pascal made a little bit earlier, it was a bad day for Sinn Féin. There's no doubt about that. Shane Logan would have lost his seat in the Carrick-on-Shannon Municipal District. And the election strategy of Sinn Féin in Ballinamore will probably now be called into question. And maybe from the outset as well, you'd have looked at it and compared maybe to 5 years ago when Martin Kinney was one of the candidates who was hugely experienced. Caroline Mulvey was co-opted in when Martin Kinney was elected as a TD. But to run 3 candidates in the municipal district again, when they failed to secure 3 seats 5 years ago, when there was a huge groundswell of support moving towards Sinn Féin, many at the time questioned the sensibility of maybe doing that again this time round, considering that you had 2 candidates who were contesting elections for the very first time. And ultimately, now it seems, if our information is correct, both are going to miss out.
Well, it wasn't now that the problem arose within Sinn Féin. The problem arose on the co-option after Martin Kinney was elected to the Dáil, when there was an internal row over whether Maureen Martin, who had run, remember, in the last local election, would be co-opted. I could describe how one Sinn Féin member described to me. He said, I arrived 5 minutes after the time for the official meeting, and the meeting was over to select a replacement. Now, that just tells you there's obviously been a lot of friction since. And remember that when friction comes into political parties, people feel isolated. And you will always isolate that maybe 3, 4, 5% that make the difference when it comes to it. And in this case, the tactics used then by Sinn Féin, I don't know whether it was locally or whether it was from HQ or what, but they decided that they were going to ditch Maureen Martin in Ballinamore,
who had a big profile and was a very known and a very able community activist as well.
Maureen Martin would be fighting the corner for Ballinamore, and I think that, and I would say that she was badly treated, to put it mildly, as far as Sinn Féin was concerned. She had fought a couple of elections for them. She had been a mouthpiece for them for 10 years, because if there was something to be thrown out or somebody to be attacked, she was sent out to do the job. And but when there was some reward there, they took away the reward from her, and I think that has had a major effect on them. But I think there's another thing that people want to look at in this. If anybody has tallied what Sinn Féin got in Leitrim and in Sligo yesterday, they got slightly over 6,000 votes. Now, In the last general election, Sinn Féin had almost 11,000 on the first count. So it's obvious that there's been a major hemorrhage from Sinn Féin. And it's like what happened to Fianna Fáil after 211. When it starts to run from you, it becomes a tide.
You're predicting, John Ellis, that Martin Kinney's seat could now be under threat if there was a general election called maybe in the autumn time or at least early spring next year.
Well, you don't predict who's under threat because every election is different.
Well, he's the current holder of the Sinn Féin seat.
He's the current holder of the Sinn Féin seat. But yesterday, the Sinn Féin vote returned to what it had been pre their glory days after 211.
Pascal, the whole vote strategy in the Bandamore Municipal District was one that we talked about considerably last night, not alone from a Sinn Féin perspective, but there was a lot of similarities maybe with Fine Gael as well, and a candidate being co-opted, and that was in the McGloin, or not co-opted, but being added on after the conventions took place, and that was in the McGloin, who I see has arrived here as well in the Bush Hotel at the moment in Carrick-on-Shannon. Very fine margins, there's no doubt about it, but it seems the decision by Fine Gael to add in down to the ticket, that seems to be one that's going to pay off for them.
Oh, well, it was a very sensible decision, but and there were circumstances, as we pointed out yesterday, which created that. And as John was pointing out about the internal divisions within Sinn Féin, there were equally disruptions and uneasiness within Fine Gael.
It was a carbon copy in many ways, wasn't
and there was some suggestion, John would be closer to it geographically as much as anything else, there were some suggestions that the disgruntled element that walked out of or left that convention mightn't support Fine Gael, and that maybe that their seat, that another seat could be in doubt. Didn't happen in the end, but certainly you're right. Now, in the case of Enda McGlone, he's an employee of Fine Gael, a regional organiser, and obviously it was his livelihood, and he couldn't move without sanction from Fine Gael headquarters, and that's why there was a delay and a post-convention decision taken, but it certainly left some ruffled feathers. In the end, though, they're probably happy people, and it's a happy camp in Fine Gael because they've got 2 seats.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
And certainly from a Drumshanbo point of view, I have to say, being totally partisan, we're going to end up with 3 councillors in the town. So.
It was just one of the points that I wanted to mention to you. This fact that Drumshanbo and the number of candidates running from Drumshanbo was a major talking point yesterday, and we were all wondering how many candidates maybe could be returned from that greater Drumshanbo area. Again, this comes at a health warning. We're very much trying to predict the outcome of the final 2 seats here. Bearing in mind, we're fairly confident in Enda McGloin, and it looks now, again, on the evidence that we have to hand, that Jerry Dolan will be taking the last seat. Drumshanbo returning 3 councillors of Brendan Barry would be seen as a good day for the town, and would be seen as a very, I suppose, shrewd management of votes by Drumshanbo. Well, Brendan Barry mentioned it yesterday as well. In order to return 3 candidates, it was very important that there was a high turnout, a high return of people coming out to vote. Were all those factors, Pascal?
There were, of course. Just to put it in context, in 1999, when I lost my council seat, there was no councillor in Drumshanbo after the 1999 election in the town, and we now have 3. And I think that the people of the town learned their lesson. We repeatedly referred to what we believed to be the view of the vast majority, particularly of those in the 2 town booths, booth number 2 and 3, as reflected in the vote, that they wanted to put in somebody like Enda McGlone. And that they were determined maybe to repair the damage they felt that they had done to him in the last election in 2014. Because let's remember, his defeat in 2014, despite the fact that Fine Gael were in trouble nationally, was a big surprise, because he would be seen as being very much embedded in the local community. But in fairness to him, he dusted himself off. He kept a high profile, was very much associated with the food hub and the job creation there, among other initiatives. And I think another aspect of his period out of office is that by being a direct employee of Fine Gael, he had direct access to ministers. He had and been Fine Gael in government, and he used that, and he used it very well. For example, he arranged deputations to ministers with a variety of local organisations over the last couple of years, and all of that accumulates, John. I mean, as John Ellis will know, I mean, all politics is local, and all of those things do reflect, and it was reflected in the fact that his vote constituted a significant number of traditional Fianna Fáil voters who decided they were going to vote local rather than party.
John Ellis, just to come to you on that point and looking ahead from a Drumshanbo perspective, and again, just throwing in the caveat that we're expecting that it's going to be, Jerry Dolan and Inda McGloin that will be returned here when we get some details from Mary Quinn, the returning officer. You have to admire maybe Drumshanbo in the way they consolidated the votes there. I think maybe it might have been yourself who made the point yesterday. Very few votes left Drumshanbo. Your own brother Keelan would have canvassed it excessively for Fianna Fáil. And as a result of I suppose, the people in Drumshanbo making sure they returned as many candidates as possible, very little, if any, votes were lost outside the Drumshanbo area.
Well, you see, there's two things come into play in the overall situation. First of all, Paddy O'Rourke was in a situation where he had ended up with a large amount of votes under him, and he hoovered them up.
There was no John McCartan, there was no Martin Kinney on his doorstep this time round.
And then you take the turnaround. Fianna Fáil end up with 2.5 quotas. So that Fianna Fáil quota, half quota, was never going to go to Sinn Féin. And they had less chance of getting it when it was coming from basically 2 units, rather than if it was coming spread over 3 candidates where one of them ended up being eliminated. So actually, it gave a much better chance to end them at Loan, because whatever about hardline Fianna Fáilers, they weren't going to vote for Sinn Féin. And locally in Drumshanbo, and we all knew this was going to happen, there was no secret in it for the last 2 months, that Drumshanbo was determined that it was going to elect somebody of, let's put it this way, a middle ground candidate. And they already had Jerry Dolan there, but
and Brendan Barry.
But Brendan Barry wouldn't be seen as a middle ground candidate. He'd be seen as a Sinn Féin candidate.
But he was still local.
He was, yeah.
He was still local.
And it still kept it local. Because when you look at the transfers that came last night, even after Caroline Mulvey's vote was given to Brendan Barry, when the hard Sinn Féin vote was finished with, it went to Pat Gillooly. And then there was the 14 or 15 votes that Rita Reynolds had, which were basically gone from Sinn Féin at that stage. And that's where Jerry Dolan's votes came from.
Now, I can tell you as well, just for one moment, Pascal, my apologies. Just, I know at the moment, council staff are meeting with the candidates and their agents to discuss what's currently going on, and afterwards we'll be expecting an announcement fairly shortly inside the next few minutes on those seats. And thanks to Kieran Britt and all the council staff here for their help over the last 2 days. It's been an absolute pleasure to have worked with them. Maybe we could just maybe get confirmation as well of what has taken place if Kieran has joined us here for a moment. Do you mind, Kieran? Have you a minute so we can maybe just find out what's taking place? Yeah. First and foremost, just take a seat, and thank you indeed for joining us on Ocean FM and the various Ocean media platforms.
You're welcome.
First and foremost, a huge thank you for all your help, all your cooperation. You've made broadcasting on this particular election count very, very simple indeed. So well done to you, well done to all the crew. Can you just tell us maybe what's been taking place here today and what we can expect from here on in?
Certainly. The votes of Ballinamore area have been rechecked. The results are going to be coming up in the next very short while. Mary Quinn, the returning officer, now is meeting with the candidates and their agents to explain the outcome of the recheck. So we're gathering everybody inside now in an area. So once Mary has spoken to the candidates, we can expect that there will be a result then at that point.
Okay. Just 2 things. One, just to confirm what we've already been telling our listeners, is that this applies to all of the candidates. In other words, there is nobody formally elected. So the recheck, if there was to be any changes, wouldn't just necessarily apply to the 2 candidates that are contesting the 7th count. It applies to all candidates.
That's correct. Mary's meeting with all candidates.
And if there was to be any basically we're talking about human error here.
Yes.
If there had been any potential human error which would have changed it, it could have equally applied to those that we've been talking about having been elected unofficially as well. If there was.
The recheck was done on all votes in the Ballinamore area.
And would therefore affect all candidates.
Yes, on all candidates.
Yeah, just for the benefit of people who probably aren't all that clear on how recounts operate. And also the spoiled votes or the rejected, the doubtful votes, I think there was around 79.
Yes, they were examined again. Mary went through those with the candidates.
And that would be in the presence of the candidates or their representatives. So it's all open and transparent.
That's correct.
And there would be an agreement then with everybody based
Absolutely.
on the decision taken by the returning officer,
That's
whether
correct,
they agreed or disagreed with her conclusions on each paper.
That's correct. Yeah. That has taken place already. Yeah.
So it's very much been a busy afternoon here from just after lunchtime today, when all the council staff returned. I suppose the one maybe positive aspect of this towards a very swift resolution is the fact we were down just to one municipal district.
That's right. Yeah, that did help things. It was one. Obviously, if there was another municipal district involved, we would have had extra staff in. But we just had the staff that were involved in the Ballinamore area in today.
All right. So we'll be expecting everything more or less to be done and dusted inside maybe the next hour or so at least.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Fantastic.
That's the plan. And finally, I'd just like to say I'd like to thank Ocean FM for their coverage, both here and indeed in neighbouring Sligo, where I'm from. Your coverage has been fantastic. Great. It's been a pleasure to work with Ocean FM.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Really good. Thank you very much.
We hope our listeners appreciate
And
it.
viewers. And viewers. For this time round, they've had the benefit of looking at the likes of myself and Pascal over the last couple of days here.
Well, it wouldn't have worked without the cooperation of the council staff.
Well, it's a partnership approach, really, isn't it?
Thank you so much
Thanks
indeed.
a million.
And well done.
Thank you.
Well done
Thank you.
on a very professional operation. So
Could I just reinforce something you were saying earlier on, John, in the context of the votes and the localisation of votes? If you remember, when Paddy O'Rourke got this extraordinarily impressive vote, I mean, absolutely, I was so pleased for him because he's a 24/7 councillor, and it reflected in the vote. You were absolutely right to say that there was a vacuum created by the absence of Martin Kenny, a giant vote catcher,
and John McCartan, a giant vote catcher with a long history, a big tradition of vote catching in that area for the McCartan family. Now, because they were gone, people had to decide where were they going to send their votes. I would suggest that because Keelan Ellis didn't need any of Paddy's surplus, that therefore those that voted, the hardcore Fianna Fáil vote that John Ellis was talking about, would have voted one O'Rourke, 2 Ellis. But because Keelan Ellis didn't need the vote, that vote was then moved to the 3rd preference and the 4th preference. So by the time that the surplus was being distributed, it went every which way. And it proved the point that you were making, that it went to the next local candidates. And it went down the line and eventually ended up in Drumshanbo. There's so much evidence of how people have voted locally in this particular election, and that has been very much bared out with the transfers. One of the interesting aspects of election 2019 that I'm hearing, not alone in Leitrim, but right across the region, Pascal, over the last couple of hours or so, has been the struggle that an awful lot of parties have found when it comes to attracting candidates to put their name forward. And as a result of that, I think you have to have the height of respect for anybody who has contested this election. But there's no doubt about it, and the main parties are making absolutely no secret about this. They are finding it next to impossible in some districts to find people to run, to find people to put their names forwards, to take on the lifestyle of a politician. And as a result of that, and we touched on it maybe in Drumshanbo, that a Fianna Fáil candidate yesterday, you couldn't find anybody. And as a result of maybe the votes of Paddy O'Rourke and the votes of Keelan Ellis, many experts would look today and say, well, Fianna Fáil have missed a trick here now, a Fianna Fáil candidate in Drumshanbo, and all of a sudden the Ballinamore Municipal District could have possibly maybe yielded 3 Fianna Fáil candidates. But it's not always that simple. There is a scarcity of people out there who are willing to take on this lifestyle.
Not only that, John, but I don't know what the statistics are, but if you were to look at it nationwide, there was a significant number of outgoing councillors who decided not to run, particularly in your own county, where Rachel Doherty, a rising star of Fianna Fáil, consolidated her position with success in local elections, was touted as a general election candidate. She decided to opt out, and I understand there was a similar situation in Sligo, that one of the councillors, but that's just in this immediate area.
John Cummins was making that very point earlier today, because he identified a huge area, and again, an area that all our listeners will be familiar with, in that greater North Roscommon area, that Sean Doherty, God be good to him, his heartland there, that if you came, say, from outside Boyle, looking at the likes of Keeju, Ballyfarnan, Coothall, Drumboylan, Knockvicker, Kilmore, there was a huge area there that there was simply nobody, party, independent, there was nobody running from that particular area.
You see, it's become an increasingly complex job, and the demands on councillors is absolutely huge. I referred earlier to Paddy O'Rourke. I mean, Paddy O'Rourke is 24/7, and he's not an exception in that regard. I mean, even Brendan Barry has made that point, that increasingly that the people impact on their time. And, the bottom line as well, if you've served at local authority level, I said earlier yesterday, we are among the most centralized countries in Europe. In other words, the government, the central government and its departments controls many of the issues that could be devolved and are devolved in other European countries to local authorities. And as a result, they have been denuded of service of issues. We used to have education, for example. There was also a role for enterprise development. That's gone. So they're all separate and they're all quangos that have been set up. I'm not saying they're not doing a good job, but it means that the power and influence that local councillors have, and I have a feeling that that has influenced some of those that served over the last 5 years, came to the conclusion, what am I doing all this for when in fact I'm not really affecting any outcomes?
One of the other points was made to be as well that if councillors were allowed, and very much backing up what you're after saying there, to work on, I suppose, reform, to work on legislation, rather than spend so much time, I suppose, in the other aspects that goes with the role, like networking, like attending various functions, like providing fundraising, like standing with a biscuit tin at various events, that is a main thing, which is putting off maybe even more women than men who would maybe be more tended to be family orientated, that they're simply not going to make that lifestyle choice.
Well, I would suggest to you, if you were spending all of your time dealing with what I would suggest are my own experience, dealing with the two major issues, housing and roads. I mean, essentially, if you think of a councillor and you think of what is it that they do or why do you go to them, invariably that's what it is. Now, social welfare will also take an element of that. But rather interestingly and ironically, is that where you have a TD sitting in the area, they go to the TD, even though in the main there are council issues. They will go to the TD about housing. They'll go to the TD about the road, when in fact the TD has no influence directly. I mean, there is the legislation that was passed back when the dual mandate ended. In other words, that you couldn't be a councillor and a TD or senator at the one time. It was introduced that the county executive were mandated to respond to TD's queries. But beyond that, the influence lies with the elected clientist society. That hasn't helped the development of local government, and really there's a need for a reform of local government to give more powers, particularly as the job has become so complex now, and councillors generally are committed. And it goes back to the point that you raised to kick off this debate, is why is it that there were, first of all, parties having difficulty getting people to stand, but equally, why is it that those who have stood, who have been elected, have decided after one run at it, they're going to run anymore?
It's a very valid point that you're after making. Now, we are hearing on our headphones almost a little bit of a hush of silence in the main room, so that could be anticipating maybe that we have some of the cons taking place from there. We will very shortly be hoping to get maybe an audio from Mary Quinn. Yeah. I'm just hearing Sligo at the moment. Pascal,
it's only a first preference. There's no other preferences on sorry.
Right, okay. All right, you are welcome back to us here. Expecting details of that 7 count confirmation of what has been happening in Manor Hamilton over the last while. Pascal, one of the things that was mentioned here so far during the conversation this afternoon, and I think John Ellis might have been the man that brought it up as regards the party share, and he mentioned Sligo and Leitrim, and maybe some of the votes secured over Sligo and Leitrim from the various parties. Fianna Fáil in Sligo, 9,284. In Leitrim, 6,129. A total of 15413. 31% of the share of the vote. And in the 2016 general election, it was 32.40. That's down 1.5%. Elsewhere, for some of the other main parties here as well, Fine Gael, and again, you can look at all these numbers, 9664 in Sligo, 4395 in Leitrim, a total of 140,159, 28%. and compared to 2016 in the general election, 27.70. Looking ahead from a Sinn Féin perspective, 2,752, 3060 in Leitrim, 5812 at the total, 2752 in Sligo, 5812 the total, 12% of the share, 17.80 was the percent in the 2016 general election. And just on others and independents, 10422 in Sligo, 4242 in Leitrim. That's 14,664 of a total, and the share 29%. The general election of 2016, the corresponding figure was 22.10, and it's 7.3%. So for Fianna Fáil, on that, if we were to look at the general election figures of 2016 compared to now, with the council seats claimed, down 1.5%. Fine Gael, there would be an increase of 0.04%. Sinn Féin, there would be a difference of minus 6.2%, backing up that claim of John Ellis. And for the independents and others, there would be 7.3% of a difference. I can actually give you those numbers there.
Just for the benefit of listeners, the Fianna Fáil actual vote in 2016 in the two counties, the totality, Sligo Leitrim.
Right.
Sligo Leitrim,
Yeah, that would be 15413.
Yeah.
That would
and then Fine Gael?
And Fine Gael, the total there would be 14059.
Right, and Sinn Féin?
Sinn Féin 5812.
Now, that doesn't take account of West Cavan or South Donegal.
Constituencies would have changed.
And what is the current totals? For
those are the current totals.
That's 2019.
Yeah, that's 2019.
What's 2016?
We just don't have the figures.
I thought you had 2016.
No, we just have the percentage figures on it.
So what I want to say is take account of what John is saying about the votes, looking at them here. But I think you have to be very cautious about interpreting the strengths of parties based on local election results. Now, it's a good spin, of course, is irrespective of the share of the vote. If you have increased your seats, that's really the bottom line, to increase your seats. Having said all that, we've already been to a secret ballot, so it's only an opinion, but I strongly feel that Enda McGlow benefited from Fianna Fáil votes in Drumshanbo, and Sean Wynne benefited from Fianna Fáil votes in Drumshanbo because there wasn't a candidate there. Now, how can you translate that into saying that was support for Fine Gael? Because that vote will revert to its party traditional vote in the general election. Shane Ellis is the Fianna Fáil candidate for Leitrim, and Shane Ellis get the Fianna Fáil vote in Drumshanbo. I am absolutely confident of that when it comes to it. So that's why it's really with a big health warning that these votes can be interpreted as being support for a party.
Just on this particular Sunday afternoon, we are here again today due to the fact that there's been a recount in the Bandamore Municipal District, and Mary Quinn, the returning officer, is going through the ballot papers now with candidates and agents. And as a result, as Kieran mentioned there, when that's completed, there will be some news coming from there. The word on the ground, and again, it's speculation, please do not take it as reads, that there will not be any significant change. We're hearing from last night, and ultimately that would spell very good news indeed for Jerry Dolan, and indeed in McGloin will be expected, as we said all along, to take the second last seat. And it seems as if Jerry Dolan is going to get in, albeit by the skin of his teeth.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think Jerry is going to mind too much. I mean, he's been fighting elections for 30 years, and I can remember, in fairness to Jerry, it's a symptom associated with independent candidates. Remember, they're effectively on their own. My late father was an independent councillor for many decades before he joined Fianna Fáil, and I can know that, he to rail against the resources.
24, 48 hours. And that was one of the topics of conversation that just came up when one will be mingling out around the hall. And, they would, main party candidates, this is now, and they were, some of them, aghast and amazed by maybe the lack of support that they received from some of the major parties.
Well, in the main, ultimately, it comes down to your family and friends. This idea that there is a well-oiled party machine out there,
and everything is covered financially, and that seems to be a major misconception.
They have been back in the day, but I think it's not anymore. I think that once that you were nominated as a candidate, you will get a certain amount of support from Fianna Fáil, for example, maybe with the postering or whatever else. But generally speaking, you're on your own, even though you're within the party umbrella, where the advantage is traditionally the advantage has been that being identified with a party, there is a solid base of voters that is loyal to that party. And therefore you can rely on that. And that's vitally important. Whereas as an independent, you have to go out and send a message. You have to actually, if you're not that well known, you have to, as happened, and we were talking with Jamie Murphy and Blannan Gallagher yesterday in the Manorhamilton electoral area. I mean, they had to start from a standing start. They had to start from scratch and had to go and knock on a door and say, by the way, this is what I stand for. Whereas if they were going to a house where the people had traditionally voted for a party, they didn't have to explain the basic philosophy of the party because those people were voting for it. But if you as an independent, the attitude would be, well, who are you? What are you standing for? Why should I bother voting for you rather than vote for my party preference? So it's very difficult for an independent. However, the one positive independents have is if sometimes they're given a relatively free run. And I would suggest, for example, that in Manorhamilton, that Phelim Gurn got in the gap the last time out, that was left by Latin Nations and Fianna Fáil, in other words. And once that he got elected, well, then you're on the pig's back effectively, because you were in a position, as we've been saying, John, and you've been saying it, that the incumbent has got a massive advantage going into the next election.
And that very much seemed to be the case, especially in the Manorhamilton Municipal District this time round. I'm just watching the body language and the movement of a lot of people just through the doors of our studio here in the Bush Hotel in Carrick-on-Shannon. And normally when you see people coming in and out, and a lot of people moving out on mobile phones and making various calls, that would suggest to me from experience, Pascal, that an announcement isn't far away.
I would suggest, yes. Obviously, people are getting the cue from inside because they have their, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, the barriers are up, but people are behind the barriers. They're watching literally every move, and it happens. I said yesterday, I was making a joke about there's a buzz of conversation, and then all of a sudden there's a shush, 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 and everybody goes silent, and they say, oh yeah, there's something going to happen now. And actually nothing has happened, and it possibly was a cat walking across the stage. So from that point of view,
all right,
that's what
John,
happens that counts.
Okay, John Ellis has rejoined us. John, just from what's taking place out in the main area here, when the votes are being counted, I know that the spoiled votes are being looked at. The council staff are talking to the candidates, are talking to their election agents. So update us, what's been happening over the last couple of minutes? And I suppose the big question that everybody at home is going to be wondering about, when are we going to have some news from the Ballymore area?
Well, the last question first, in about 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
We'll have the final result, the legal result. There was 3 queries identified, mainly one of 2 unstamped ballot papers, and there was one with regards to a transfer which wasn't right, and there was one where there was a ballot paper with a 1 and 2 2s on it, which actually the 2 2s was one each for Jerry Dolan and one for Pat Gillooly.
As luck would have it.
Yeah, but the net result is that the margin has increased from 4 to 5.
Okay.
So Jerry Dolan will win by 5 votes.
All right. Again, this is what the speculation is, and very much
there's no speculation. That's it.
Could I maybe, because we're essentially just waiting now. We're in trying to establish what's going to happen. And we, as John has pointed out, we kind of feel we know what's going to happen. I was just wondering, because you picked this up earlier, John, what implications do you think, looking at the voting patterns, what implications do you think this will have for the general election in Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal, North Roscommon?
There's a major change, if that's one way to describe it, with regards to voting patterns from the last general election. The last general election, Sinn Féin picked up, I estimate, now, and I could be wrong on this, between 1,200 and 1,500 Fianna Fáil votes, and Jerry Reynolds picked up another 1,000. If you take what Paddy O'Rourke had in the last election and take it from the Fianna Fáil, I
can give you percentages on the last general election. That Sinn Féin had 12% in Sligo Leitrim.
Yeah.
And the other percentages, Fianna Fáil, 31, 28%, Fine Gael, 12%.
Yeah, but we don't have the actual figures, so the percentages don't really mean a lot to listeners, other than just giving.
But if you were to compare maybe those general election figures, and Pascal made a very good point that the boundaries would have changed, but just maybe look at the percentage changes, and again from the local elections compared to the general elections, Fianna Fáil it would be minus 1.5%. Fine Gael up 0.4%. Sinn Féin, there would be a significant change. I think this is something that you've identified, minus 6.2%, and the others and independents would be an increase of 7.3%. So that minus 6.2%, again, you identified, and just before you left us, you were maybe saying speculation, could be the word to use, maybe as regards the safety or the security of a Sinn Féin seat, i.e. the Martin Kenny seat in Sligo-Leitrim.
Well, nobody knows. As I said, every election is different. But if you take the trends that have come from yesterday, there's no doubt in my mind, but the return to the old status quo in my early days in it, where Fianna Fáil could very well win 3 seats in Sligo-Leitrim.
Why would you say, John, that Martin Kenny picked up 1,500 Fianna Fáil votes and Jerry Reynolds that 2,500 Fianna Fáil votes drifting away with what was, in fairness, a very good candidate who ultimately did better than everybody thought he'd do. He got nearly 6,000 votes. So I'm just curious how you base that sort of analysis.
It's a very simple exercise.
Why did they go? Because we were, Fine Gael were not popular.
No, I'll tell you, it's a very simple exercise. They didn't go to Fine Gael. They went to Sinn Féin, a lot of them.
Why? Your opinion?
Well, my opinion might differ with a lot of the public. But my opinion is that what happened there actually was that Paddy O'Rourke ended up getting 3,500 votes in Leitrim. So where did the other 2.5 go?
Well, you had huge competition and poaching from both Mark McSharry's team and from Eamon Scanlon.
The total poach out of Leitrim was only in the region of 1,000 votes.
And out of West Cavan.
Yeah. There was 1,000 votes out of Leitrim, and there was 600 or something out of West Cavan. Paddy O'Rourke had 1,800 votes that came out of Cavan, and he had from Donegal, and he had a few through Sligo. So I'm
just curious about your train of thought.
But that's where it comes from. That's where the missing 2,500 went.
And you believe that they will return next time out?
The
hope is
there is. Well, if Leitrim want to elect a TD, they're going to have to vote Leitrim. That's the simple answer of it. There's no.
Well, there would be a suggestion that they voted Leitrim for Kenny and for Jerry Reynolds, who narrowly lost out.
Yeah.
It was on Sligo transfers that beat him in the end.
Yeah. The same as what happened to me in 1982. But what happens in the next one is that you have the one question that none of us here are able to decide. There is going to be 7,000 or 8,000 votes in North Roscommon, and they're going to be critical to whatever way they break down.
The old Sean Doherty vote
the old DAC vote is going to be critical, and whoever can garner whatever candidate gets the bulk of that is going to become into a very strong position.
So you would suggest, based on the figures, I don't think they can be questioned, is that the most vulnerable of the 3 established parties would be Sinn Féin. The most vulnerable.
Very much so.
Not Fine Gael and not Fianna Fáil.
Well, you see, the question is for Fine Gael. You see the slide that has taken place yesterday for Fine Gael. Okay, they're down. They're 1,800 votes behind Fianna Fáil and Leitrim yesterday. Yet they gain 2 seats. But that's the luck of the draw, because they had probably fared badly in the last local election, with the last seats that they should have held. But if Fianna Fáil had another candidate in Manorhamilton yesterday, we would have won 3 seats, no doubt in my mind, earthly. And if we had a suitable candidate, and now that suitable word covers a lot of things in the Ballinamore area, that would have been able to take a wider vote rather than a parochial vote and say putting someone into Drumshanbo, like we saw the last time. Francie Gilmartin was only 100 votes short of what it would have taken for him to be elected the last time.
And he was hugely affected by the boundary change.
He was robbed. And if Francie Gilmartin the last time had jumped into the Carrick area, he would have been elected.
But you could have made the same argument maybe for Enda McGloin the last time, who was hugely impacted. And that maybe was a reason why he would have lost.
There were other factors.
He wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of other
There were
factors.
and Fine Gael were not popular.
No.
Yeah.
In
But the boundary
people wanted
change
to get
didn't
them
help
out.
him.
No, well,
it
I know, but I think
didn't. But
I
there
think
was-
it,
yeah,
I think it
but
was
there
an anti-Fine Gael, John.
Yeah.
I don't think the boundaries were marginal.
Not the be all and end all.
They were marginal
You
for
see,
him, but certainly for Francie they were, but not for Enda.
I totally accept.
know,
Yeah,
I
I
think it was
accept your
an-
point. It definitely helped Francie.
Enda's loss was much less than it would have been for Francie, because Francie lost Leitrim Village, and that area around Kiltahart, which was his base.
Which was reflected yesterday, probably in the Paddy Farrell vote that he
course.
secured around Kilnagross, Kiltahart, that area. Can I just come back to you on one point we were talking to Pascal about a little bit earlier, and going back to maybe that Sean Doherty vote in North Roscommon, as you referred to it there. John Cummins, a well-known Fianna Fáil councillor in the Boyle area. I was just listening to him a little bit earlier on today, and he described that area of Roscommon, that greater North Roscommon area, where Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and all the major parties had looked to try and get a candidate there, but none of them could have secured one for the local elections. And the retirement of Rachel Doherty, a daughter of Sean, the late Sean Doherty. And as a result of that, that left it as most difficult for maybe trying to gauge where vote was going to go at from that particular area. Would that maybe fact of a lack of a councillor in an area in any way have an impact on the potential of gathering votes for a general election?
Well, remember that the only one that's going
or would it help maybe candidates from outside of the North Roscommon area, i.e. in Leitrim?
Well, I'll answer you that with 2 or 3 answers. First of all, I can understand why nobody wanted to run, because I wouldn't fancy running against John Cummins, because he's been one of the most effective councillors ever I came across and ever I dealt with. He is really effective. He knows his people, and like, it's well known in Roscommon that if at any stage he had decided that he wanted to run for the Dáil, that he would have been more than an acceptable candidate, more so. But he doesn't want it. He has made it quite clear that he doesn't want it. And the one thing he did yesterday was he hoovered up all of Rachel Doherty's votes.
Mm-hmm.
And there is more affinity probably with North Roscommon and Leitrim than there is with North Roscommon and Sligo. And I'm not saying that now in a nasty way.
There's more of a natural connection. I'd agree with you.
Yeah.
I'd agree entirely with you.
There is more of a natural connection, because Rigna, Ballyfarn and Caja, Drumshambo was where they were sucked into.
Even secondary school would be a prime example of it myself. That's where we would have gone to secondary school in Drumshambo, along with our producer, who all attended it here at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a natural hinterland.
Yeah.
And as a result, in fact, it proven in your election,
Yeah.
which was a difficult election for you,
Yeah.
going into North Roscommon, and you got 2,500 votes.
2,500 votes.
And at the time, there was this saying, "Oh no, Fianna Fáil won't get it,"
Yeah.
and they did.
Oh yeah. No, and the other.
So you
thing-
think that vote is there?
Well, let's
come back.
Let's put it this way. There's a large percentage of it there, I think, that it'll be more inclined to go back towards Leitrim than go towards Sligo.
Even though the Sligo candidates are massively cultivating North Roscommon over the last since the boundary change.
You see, you can cultivate, but do you accumulate?
Can I give you an example, maybe, John Ellis, that would back up that argument as well, of the connection maybe between North Roscommon and Leitrim? And maybe 2 prominent Fianna Fáil men here, you might want to accept this, but Frank Feehan, based in Boyle, was hugely successful in the elections that he contested in Leitrim. Now, there were a number of reasons for that. For instance, Damien Brennan, I know, was his campaign manager and did an absolutely fantastic job in those general elections as well. But I think it's very much backing up the point that you made there of that connection between North Roscommon and Leitrim. There's more of a connection there maybe than there would be, say, between North Roscommon and Sligo. And Frank Feehan would have been
of the vote in the Leitrim section of it. So it does prove that there is what actually cost me that election was that there was a calculation of how the population of South Roscommon had rocketed in the period, had grown by something like 6,000 or 7,000 from the previous election, over the previous 5 years.
And that's very much continued to be the way.
And that skewed the whole balance of where votes were coming from. And that was what cost that election.
Well, I think the point that John and both of you have been making is that about the hinterland, that Frank Feehan, as a Roscommon-based candidate, was acceptable to Fine Gael in South Leitrim.
Yeah.
And they held the South Leitrim Fine Gael vote.
Yeah, the hardcore Fine Gael vote, the hell.
which the question was in advance, would that happen?
Yeah.
And it did. And of course, Frank Feehan to this day will praise the people of Leitrim for getting him elected.
He's got a fantastic record. He's got a fantastic record.
But it works.
It's
not forgotten, as John is pointing out, it worked the other way as well for the Leitrim candidate. And it just reinforces the point you're making about the empathy between North Roscommon and Leitrim. That there's a natural sort of empathy there. And people that voted in Roscommon for John, the North Roscommon, didn't feel that they were voting for an outsider.
And that's a big change from the job.
If I was a candidate, I have to be honest, I would have known as many people in that area, Cap, I might know in Sligo.
Yeah, and that would have
over
been
20th.
That was after with Paddy O'Rourke being his connection to Cavan last time.
I had gone to school with a lot of them. I would have had a lot of connections back into Cavan. You know, fellas that you knew down the years from this, that, and the other. But no, it'll be an interesting where it takes place.
The timing of that general election now, there's going to be a lot of debate and a lot of speculation as regards when that is going. When is Micheál likely, in your opinion, gentlemen, maybe to go with the timing of an election? Will he wait till the spring of 2020? Will he do it this autumn?
My opinion is the Taoiseach today is talking about whether or not he'll have election. I have no doubt that when he goes back and looks at the figures, he'll be finding every way to prevent having an election after yesterday.
But forget about Leo for a second. If Micheál Martin was in the confidence and supply agreement.
Wait now. Micheál Martin has committed himself to do another budget, subject to the budget being acceptable to Fianna Fáil.
And his track record heretofore would suggest that if Micheál Martin says something out of his word,
he'll stick to it.
Yes.
And whoever causes that general election without having good reason for it will be punished, because people are not happy, anything but happy. They don't want to see any more chaos on the ground. And you could have chaos, because remember that if there's an election, bar going on yesterday's figures, you're into somebody, whoever has the biggest party, trying to negotiate a new deal with the others. And the other thing I see happening is that I would not expect to see whoever it is end up with a dose of with 3 or 4 maverick independent ministers who have caused chaos. And remember, there's 2 or 3 things that have been done by the independents that are going to come home to haunt Fine Gael. Shane Ross's action is going to have a major bearing in rural Ireland. He will become the hate figure of a lot of rural people. And there's a few questions need to be asked, and I don't know whether they have been asked.
But at the same time, in Shane Ross, and I know there's a lot of people are going to criticise him, and we just look at maybe some of the projects and some of the funding that he's been involved in, and some of the councillors who are working very closely with him, some in this particular franchise area, and they would say that, you know, Shane Ross comes in for an awful lot of unfair criticism.
Well, you see, Shane Ross only looks after his own, and the independents who have access to him, because we see it come out, to have the announcements 2 days even before some of their Fine Gael colleagues.
Well, Michael Ring, would be greatly more attributed for funding, but at the same time, that comes from the government, which Shane Ross is a member of, John.
Yeah, but the one thing I will say about Michael Ring, and I've known Michael Ring from even before he was in Leinster House, Michael Ring knows what's politically astute and cute when it comes to dealing with the public, whether it's in Leitrim or Mayo or anywhere else. And if Michael Ring feels that something is for the good of an area, he will do it. And I give him credit for that.
And by the way,
I saw that in Drumshanbo.
I was just saying, going back to Enda McGlone. Enda McGlone's influence, and it was widely known in Drumshanbo that his influence and his access to Michael Ring, and the fact that Michael Ring, as John says, has the money and is a rural Irish minister as well, fully understands the nature of it. There's no question about that.
John Ellis made an interesting point, Pascal, when he said that whoever at this stage causes a general election could really suffer the consequences. And if you think of it, is there maybe after the local elections, the European elections, recent referendums as well that have taken place, is there election fatigue now for a while? So the last thing anybody wants is maybe hearing inside the next couple of weeks is going to be a general election in the autumn?
Funnily enough, I am of the opinion that it's the opposite. And the reason I'm suggesting that is that the Green Wave yesterday indicated that there is an appetite out there for change. Whether the change is towards or against Fine Gael as a government or in favour of Fianna Fáil, but there is an appetite for change. And I think that it is a worrying aspect of yesterday's results for the two established parties, because even though Fianna Fáil have got bragging rights over Fine Gael in terms of being continue to be the largest party in local government, and their share of the vote has gone up. I haven't seen the most recent, but I think it has gone up higher than what the opinion polls, which, by the way, traditionally happens. Fianna Fáil are never, I think, accurately represented.
Always 3-4%.
They're always ahead of what the people have. What I'm suggesting is, I think there is an appetite out there for change, and let's be honest about it. We have several crises in this country that this government have to be accountable for at some stage, and one relates to housing and the other relates to health. So the fact that people have gone the way they've gone yesterday, and they haven't gone extreme, because I was listening to Boyd Barrett earlier today, he said it was a bad day for the left, but they've gone for a moderate left with the Greens. And I think they're sending a subliminal message to the political parties.
That has to be the big story of local elections 2019, when we look at it, maybe even to Europe to a degree as well. When we look at it in a national picture, is that we all expected maybe the likes of Brexit would be a major issue. But for some reason, over the last couple of weeks, climate change just seemed to almost like a rolling stone. It gathered so much momentum. And as the elections became a bigger and a bigger issue. Now, I haven't read too many of the newspapers today for obvious reasons, but at the same time, it seems that the government is already reacting to the surge in support for the Greens by coming out with climate measures of their own. Is it a surprise, or did it catch the main parties by surprise in any way, John Ellis, that climate was such a big issue in these local elections?
I don't think that anybody is shocked that climate has become such a big issue.
But that's the top issue, more so than Brexit.
But you always want to remember that every time you switch on your television, that you watch the news, there's a hurricane somewhere. Instead of having one hurricane a year, they're having 2 or 3 hurricanes a year. We actually saw climate change probably affect us last year. We had a tremendous summer. We hadn't had a summer like it for years. And then we had 2 or 3 fairly heavy storms, which we normally wouldn't get. Like the ones last year, the last one I remember there was anything close to it was in 1960 or 61. And I saw trees blowing down everywhere. So the people have realized it. But there's an awful lot of things that could be done to affect climate change. They're going to need government money to do them. But long term, they will be more beneficial than an awful lot of the shouting about farmers and everything else. Like even the farmers are being blamed now for CO2, for greenhouse gases. But the actual fact is that if farm waste was properly managed, it actually can become carbon neutral or carbon beneficial. But it's going to take money to do that. And there's several other things. I'm looking at something now, and people might laugh at. I'm going to say, I look at my local school every morning, and there'll be 20 or 30 cars delivering pupils to it, all of whom in the old days would have had free travel to school.
On a school bus.
On a school bus. But because of the changes that was brought in, because Fianna Fáil brought them in, I can't say it wasn't, the net result is that it's now more beneficial for parents to drive their kids to school than to put them on the school bus. The knock-on effect is that where you had one vehicle bringing the whole lot, you now have 20, plus the school bus. But these are the sort of things that will have to be tackled. And
that's one local example, but you can multiply that maybe by several times over. Pascal Mooney, one maybe positive thing here for the Greens as well is where they seem to have gathered enough support, and it's twofold this, and I'm not sure if you'll agree with it or not. The Greens, and listening to him and Ryan recently being interviewed, is that despite what happened to them the last time they were in government with Fianna Fáil, they're not afraid to go back into power again. They want to implement change if the opportunity was to arise in the future. According to their leader, they would grasp it. They would go in to make sure that change was implemented. And if they suffer the consequences, maybe in an election like what has happened here before, they're going to take that particular risk. The other thing about the Greens as well is that they don't mind if independents or other parties decide to adopt their policies. They're almost openly encouraging that. And as a result of that, I think they've made a real connection with the electorate.
But they're a pragmatic political party.
Yeah.
What's the point of being outside the tent, peeing in, when you should be inside the tent, peeing out?
Sinn Féin, look at the contrast between them and Sinn Féin.
No, but Sinn Féin changed their policy in that Mary Lou McDonald made it clear within the last 12 months that they would now be prepared to negotiate as a minority party in government. That's I mean, that
But
kind of
when
went
push
under the
comes to
radar.
shove, will
Yeah.
they do that?
No,
But
they
push
No,
comes-
but I'm
no,
saying that
yeah.
it was a massive change of stated public policy by
Yeah,
Sinn
but-
Féin to do that, in contrast to what's happening in the north and in Westminster,
I'm still not convinced
where they
they'll do
won't
it,
even
Pascal.
where they won't even take their seats.
Are you, John?
I'm convinced that if the situation arose where they could go into government, the hard men from West Belfast would tell them, sorry, you must stay out and abstain, and be able to hurl all the rocks into the glass house
possibly,
rather
yeah.
than being in the glass house trying to keep them out. But the one thing I will say about this, and it doesn't, none of us knows what a general election will bring about, but green issues are going to be well up the line for all parties. But the green issues are going to have to be dealt with in a sustainable way. And we all know it. I actually was at a meeting last week where our local community centre, I'm one of the directors, and there's a refurbishment job done. And what's actually going in for the central heating system is coming out, and there's a heat pump going in place of it. And I think that the suggestion was that it was about $8,000, I think now, to do it. And the payback on it was 5 years. Now, my answer to that is it would pay the government to actually subsidise people to go that sort of route. Now, people might say, oh, geez, you're giving them something for nothing. But there's going to be a big saving in what we'll be paying for carbon credits and everything else on the other side. And you'd do well to get every house in the country done in 5 years. That's no different than...
Yeah.
Just to further your point, by the way.
Can I come back to you in a moment? I'm just looking out through the door, Pascal and John, and I see a hell of a lot of people shaking hands with Jerry Dolan. That would
Well, I
suggest
think
to
they
me
probably
that-
know
Yeah.
unofficially
Oh, yeah,
that's
no,
happening.
yeah, I just
There's
think so.
not that
I
many
think
people in there.
It backs up what you
Yeah.
were saying.
No, I was just saying about the Greens' the Greens' desire to go in government. But sure, what else would they do as a political party if they want to further and advance their policies? They did it when they went into coalition with Fianna Fáil. Now it was to their detriment. But in fairness to them, they stuck to their guns. And it's amazing to think that they are supporting carbon tax, which is not all that popular. No tax is popular, but they stuck to their guns on it, and people out there knew that they were supporting the introduction of carbon tax, and yet they have increased their vote significantly. What I was pointing out earlier is that I think that the two major parties have got to have a real concern about the mandate that the electorate gave yesterday, which, you know, both political parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, in my opinion, stood still. Basically, they didn't necessarily significantly increase. So what you're probably going to end up with is who's going to be ahead of each other, of Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil. And it would seem to me that we're going to end up with a similar makeup of government, John, next time out than we had, maybe with some changes. If the Greens, Labour, Social Democrats were to align and put forward a policy platform, and then negotiate with either Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, well, then you will have a situation where there'll be 3 or 4 party groups. I can't see it going any other way.
Has it got all the ingredients, Pascal, of being a volatile and uncertain government?
No, I think, in fairness to Irish political parties, once they agree a platform, I think once they agree that they're going to, they will implement that platform and will form government. Now, you know the last time how long it took, but they do, once that they agree a platform, they will proceed with that platform. But I'm not so sure that the results yesterday, are, for example, Fianna Fáil have had a very good day, that they're going to necessarily translate into a significant increase in the number of seats.
And you'd be careful as regards the independents that you would see maybe being involved to prop up a government.
Well, if you look at some of the independents, some of their wish lists were not in the best interest of the country or of their constituents even, but because there were issues on the ground, they were inclined to push them. But I think you also have to look at down the road. There will be volatile situations. And when Brexit is over, nobody knows where the economy of this country is going to stand. The economy could end up in a heap in this country, and we could end up back in a scenario that mightn't be far behind 2007. And there is that danger in it.
I mean, unless there's a deal done between the EU and the Brits, there'll be checks on the border.
Of course, there'll be checks on the border. That's the obvious thing. The other thing that you will see that the abuse of various commodities will then start, like it's going on already. For instance, there's carbon charges here on certain items of fuel. There's none in the north. There's various things. And our agricultural sector could take such a hammering. And remember, it's been hammered already for the past 12 or 18 months. And if it was to take another hammering, we'd be in serious trouble. And the big issue, and people mightn't think it is, that some of what's been classed as environmental friendly actions are actually poisoning our environment entirely. And the main one of that is, and people mightn't agree with me, is that the planting of silky spruce is now destroying every waterway in the country and has done it.
Allegedly.
No, there's no allegedly in it, John. The research shows. The research shows. And the best
in cases.
Yeah,
but there's still, I think there's still a degree of, I know, say, if LEITRIM have made the point, but
No, but John, I think you want to look at something in this. The effect of this over the past 35, 40 years is to be seen in every stream, and in your part of the country, the trout are gone from them.
The fish levels, yeah.
The fish levels are gone.
And Justin Warnock has brought up, I agree
Yes.
with you, Justin Warnock has brought up research on that. And
Yeah.
a lot of the lakes, the fish levels and a lot of the rivers.
The other thing is, we don't know how the effect of this is having on the water that we drink every bloody day. Because I know there's one particular well, and I won't have to tell you where it is, and every time I drive by it, there's somebody taking water out of it, and there's a group scheme or public water supply right beside them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is this danger that we don't know what the chemicals that are going into everything. Because every chemical, it might be meant to kill one thing, but there's no chemical that doesn't kill more than the one thing that it's meant to kill.
Could I ask John, just to change the direction slightly, John, would you have any insight, because you were involved in these negotiations yourself as a councillor, any indication of what the new grouping will be on Leitrim County Council as a result of yesterday's results and today's?
Well, I'm not privy to what the council.
Well, what's your
Still waiting for the council, still waiting for some information to take place on that. We're delighted at this stage as well to be joined by Martin Kinney. And just again to recap, for the benefit of people at home, on that 7th count in Bandamore, very much for the last seat, we are anticipating it's going to be a battle, and I think it's well known at this stage, a battle between Jerry Dolan, an independent councillor from the Greater Drumshanbo area, and Pat Gilooly, a first-time Sinn Féin candidate. Martin Kinney, good afternoon to you. Thank you indeed for joining us again here on Ocean FM. The word on the ground, the speculation is that it seems to be that a bad weekend for Sinn Féin on these council elections is going to continue. It seems Jerry Dolan is in the box seat here.
Jerry Dolan has look, there's about 5 votes, we think, in it, and Jerry is going to take the seat. And, due congratulations to Jerry. It's a magnificent achievement for him. He's a long-standing councillor and has worked very hard for 28 years on Leitrim County Council. And, it pays dividends, obviously, when it comes to getting votes in every corner and crevice of the constituency, and Jerry did. We've seen number 8s and number 9s been counted in that election. So, that's what it's all about. Pat is disappointed. He worked very hard, people, and he'd be saying himself, where could he have got another 4 or 5 votes? But maybe if he got those 4 or 5, Jerry would have got 6 or 7 more somewhere else. So that's the way it works.
I was making the point, Martin, earlier on. I wonder whether you'd agree or not, because John was pointing out what he thought was the total similarity in terms of the platform between Pat Gilooly coming from a farming background, Jerry coming from a farming background, that they were appealing to the same pool of votes. But I made the suggestion that the distinctive difference was that Jerry was an independent and was therefore more likely to pick up that sort of non-partisan preference that you've referred to with the 6 or 7. Would you think that was significantly the difference?
You see, Jerry has, as an independent, as we know within parties usually divide up areas to each candidate, and Jerry has the freedom to roam everywhere, and he does. And Jerry has a core vote of about 500 votes, and he can get that out. And he probably works on that long before the election. He knows the election is coming. And then every day for the last 2 months, he got up at 11 o'clock every morning. He went out, whether he had a company or not, and went to every door in the constituency, whether he knew the people lived there or not, and asked them, don't forget me, put me down somewhere. Doesn't matter what vote you give me.
Looking for number one. You just want them to
give
remember.
me a preference somewhere. Don't forget me. Give me a preference somewhere, and that's paid dividends for him.
And you think that the same way have applied in the case of Des Guckeen and Carrick?
Absolutely the same applied in Des Guckeen and Carrick. Des Guckeen is canvassing for the last probably two years at this stage. And fair play to him. Like that's
where we're talking about Jerry Dolan, and there's no doubt about it. He's a political survivor, Martin Kinney. There's no doubt about that. And you'd always, I suppose, worry for any candidate that would find themselves in a position going up against somebody like Jerry Dolan in a dogfight for that last seat. Inevitably, I presume, like all parties, after local elections, when seats are lost in municipal districts, inquests will start. And we touched on it last night. And the decision maybe to run 3 candidates by Sinn Féin in the Ballymore area.
Absolutely. It's a decision we have to look at again. I mean, look, you can't change it. It's done. But at the end of the day, it's I suppose where we came from the last time we ran 3 and we took 2. This time we were in a similar position, felt if we ran 3, we'd take 2. Now, our vote didn't go down very much. In fact, our vote overall, probably in the Ballymore area, only went down by 120 votes or so. But the Fine Gael vote went down by, I think, 300 or 400. But by running 2 candidates, they actually secured the 2 seats. So, there's a little bit of swings and roundabouts in it. And if there had to be maybe a little bit better transfer for Pat from other areas, he might have gone over the line, but his problem was, you see, that outside of Caroline Mulvey, he had very little place to get transfers. That's the reality, and that's sort of what snookered Pat a little bit. Whereas Brendan Barry, there was an awful lot of candidates in Drumshanbo who were going to transfer to a Drumshanbo candidate, and that's what assisted him to get over the line fast.
We spoke to Brendan Barry last night, and one of the noticeable things about the election locally in Drumshanbo would have been the turnout, and a high turnout was very much always going to be necessary with so many running in order for Drumshanbo to return maybe 2, and what it now seems like 3 candidates in the area. So the mobilisation of the vote in the Greater Drumshanbo area was significant here.
Competition is the life of trade, and that's what it does. It brings them out. And the more people that were running, the more people were going to come out to vote. That's how it works.
It was an extraordinarily high turnout in Drumshanbo in the 3 booths. It was nearly 1,100 votes out of 1,381. So if you were to take away those that have passed on, those who weren't there, and for a variety of reasons couldn't vote, it was nearly like a 90% turnout. And as Martin says, it reflected in it. Could I ask Martin something else in the context of these results? What implications do you see for Sinn Féin in this constituency in the general election and your own position?
Look, it makes it more difficult. That's the reality, and it's something that we'll be taking stock of. It's not something that I've had time to think about very much.
I appreciate that, and I don't want to be throwing you the $64,000 question either.
I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and it is something that we have to look at and look very seriously at. I mean, we're in a situation where yesterday we had 4 councillors in Leitrim County Council. Today we have 2, and also in Sligo we're in difficulty there. So it is going to be a difficult time ahead. But as when we spoke of this last night, they're 2 different elections. They're not the same. They're a different. It's a different agenda that people go with when they go to vote in general election. Having said that, I'm very conscious, and I'm going to be getting out on doors very quickly myself. Whether there's an election in the spring or in the autumn, because that's what we need to do.
That's something we've been speculating about here. Sorry, Pascal, is the timing of that general election from a Sinn Féin perspective now, the later the better?
I don't know. I think it could come in the autumn. And I'd be very much expecting that it may well come in the autumn.
After the budget.
After the budget, you could be looking at an election, or it may go into the spring. But one way or the other, I think everyone needs to be getting ready.
I was about to say that what maybe the general public don't always understand or maybe think about is the loss of your councillors is the loss of a support structure.
Absolutely.
As well, not just for you, but for any TD who is standing in any party or none, the support structure. And by the way, what may be little known is that Shane Ross lost 2 of his 3 councillors in Dún Laoghaire yesterday, which is obviously going to maybe impact on him too. I presume that's something you take into account. It's going to put further pressure on you administratively.
Absolutely. And we always used to say, that approximately 5 to 6 councillors would elect a TD. If you have 5 to 6 good councillors working in a constituency, and once you go below that, you're having difficulty. Being a sitting TD and being an incumbent and all that probably helps a little bit. But if you're trying to make a breakthrough, and the big thing that helped me break breakthrough in 2016 was having 4 councillors in Leitrim and having 2 councillors in Sligo and having another one in South Donegal and having one in West Cavan. There's a bit of a vacancy in all of those places now, so that's going to be a problem.
Could I also ask you, Martin, from your position as a TD, what implications, if any, do you think there is for all of the major parties, Sinn Féin, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, of the green surge in terms of the next election? Do you think that will have an impact on all parties? That maybe they will follow through and take seats from all of those three parties?
They may well do. I think particularly in more urban areas rather than in the very rural constituencies. But having said that, I think what really it's saying is, that all parties are going to have to come to a situation that they have clear policies on all of this climate change stuff.
Yes.
And one of the problems you have with that, and we have it particularly in the kind of constituency we're in, is that for an awful lot of people out there, there's kind of a clash of crises, if you like.
Yes.
They also have a crisis in their lifestyle and being able to pay for everything.
Yes.
And yet you have a crisis in climate, and that's going to cost money. And how are you going to marry those two together? That's a problem that everyone will have to
finally,
face.
John, do you think that there's an appetite for change among the electorate reflected in yesterday's vote for the Greens, or is it a one-off? Is it a unique situation? That's what I'm wondering. What implications does it have for people wanting change?
Yeah, I think there's a change in the younger people in particular. They're eager for this situation to be addressed in a very formidable way. I think even with voters of all ages and all classes, I think the surge toward the Green vote is really saying, everybody needs to deal with this, but I don't think it's something that will last. I think a lot of that vote will go away from the Greens in a general election, but there are a lot of the younger people it may not.
All right. One point I want to put to you on that, and I heard the point being made this morning, Martin, that yes, there's definitely a young Green vote out there at the moment, but the suggestion was made earlier this morning that they're also effective at maybe convincing older voters to vote Green now, in the sense that they're coming up with the argument, you guys have caused this problem. You've neglected the environment for too long. And as a result now, do your piece before it's too late. And older voters are listening to them. And as a result of voting Green for the first time at an advanced stage in life.
Yeah, that's very true. Now, one of the problems the Green Party is going to have, and it's a problem with any party that's developing, is that you for the first, I suppose, couple of decades of development for any political party, you have ups and downs. And the Greens had an up before and had a very big down.
Mm-hmm.
They're starting to come up again. Their situation will be over the next 4 to 5 years to try and sustain that, particularly if they get a place in government. That's going to be their difficulty, because it's a bit like Barack Obama. Change is promised, but when people sit down and they start looking for the change at the end of the term and they don't see an awful lot of it, they go away from them again.
Could I just ask you something, Martin, before you go, because it just had it in my head. From a Sinn Féin perspective, do you have any insight into how the talks are going in the north? Or would you be, as a party, optimistic this time round of a resolution? Because that it's something that many Irish people are focused on in terms of the restoration.
Extremely focused on it.
All right, gentlemen, if I can just interrupt, we have some details coming through on the draw in Ballinamore. Let's rejoin the returning officer, Mary Quinn.
113 votes cast. So I think that's a particularly very good achievement. And I want to pay tribute to it. I'd also like to thank the media, Ocean, Shannonside, Leitrim Observer. They've been very good here the last number of days, so I want to thank you for your courtesy and patience. I'd like to thank Joe and Rosie Dolan and the staff in the Bush Hotel for the facilities and the excellent, attention given to us over the past number of days. I'd like to thank the Gardaí for minding the count centre of the night and the Friday night, and for their assistance also. I'd also like to thank Joe Smith, the European returning officer.
So just to let you know what we are hearing there, Mary Quinn, the returning officer here in the Bush Hotel, has just taken to the podium. We are waiting for the 7th count, the period of time where we left off last night in the Ballinamore Municipal District. Once again, just to recap, the big story, I suppose, of the election in many ways, which led to the recount, was the closeness of the contest between Jerry Dolan, independent councillor, and Pat Gillooley, first-time candidate for Sinn Féin, locked in an almighty battle. We believe 5 votes will be dividing the two candidates at the end of this count. It's also widely anticipated that Enda McGloin will be picking up a seat as well in the Ballinamore Municipal District. And that final seat, it seems that Jerry Dolan, the great political survivor that is Jerry Dolan, will be elected on the final count as well. So a wonderful performance of him. And again, we believe, as Pascal and as Martin Kinney has already conceded here from a Sinn Féin perspective in an interview on Ocean just a few moments ago. Somewhere we believe in the region of about 5 votes. It really is as small as that, ultimately proving to be the difference between the two candidates for that final seat on the Ballinamore Municipal District. Mary Quinn, at the moment, who we must say, and all the council staff here in Leitrim over the course of the weekend have done an absolutely magnificent job, hugely effective as always. And we're absolutely meticulous.
The results of the 6th count. I'll just give the media a chance, and then I will move to declare it. So 1 second. So the following is the result of the 8th count for the Ballinamore local electoral area, which consisted of the distribution of Ita Reynolds Flynn's surplus of 15 votes. Dolan Jerry, non-party, +6, total votes 851, 851. Gilhooly Pat, Sinn Féin, +4, total votes 845, 845. Madeleine Enda, Fine Gael, +5, total votes 895, 895. Non-transferable papers not affected, 0, total votes 208, 208. No candidate has reached the quota on this count. As there is one continuing candidate more than the number of seats left to be filled and no available surpluses, I am now excluding the lowest candidate, Pat Gilhooly, and I deem the following candidates to be elected without reaching the quota: Madeleine Enda and Dolan Jerry. As all the seats are deemed to be filled, I propose to formally declare the results of the election for the Ballinamore local electoral area. Declaration of result. The following is the result of the poll taken on May 24, 2019 to fill the 6 seats in the local electoral area of Ballinamore, Leitrim County Council. I declare the candidates to be elected in the following order: Paddy O'Rourke, Fianna Fáil; Keelan Ellis, Fianna Fáil; Brendan Barry, Sinn Féin; Ita Reynolds Flynn, Fine Gael; Enda Madeleine, Fine Gael; Jerry Dolan, non-party. That concludes the declaration of the result, and indeed that concludes the count for Leitrim County Council for 2019. Thank you very much.
And that is Mary Quinn, and that is confirmation of the state of play in the Ballinamore electoral area in the Magloin, as we anticipated, and indeed Jerry Dolan being confirmed that they are taking the final 2 seats there on the 8th count on the distribution of the Ita Flynn-Reynolds vote, or Reynolds-Flynn vote, I should say, very much, I suppose, confirming what we have been anticipating and widely speculating on over the last while. Pascal Booney, it's confirmation of it.
It is, but what's interesting is that despite the fact that it was a Fine Gael transfer, now admittedly within that was the Paddy O'Rourke surplus, is that Jerry Dolan beat the remaining Fine Gael candidate in the transfer list, in that he got 6 votes to Enda McGlone's 5, which is again points up what we've been saying earlier on about his ability to be able to have gone around saying, make sure you give me a stroke somewhere, and the stroke somewhere came up with 6 votes. That's rather interesting. But Pat Gilhooly must be bitterly disappointed to sit there and listen to, I get 4 votes and it was only a handful. So the old cliche about that every vote counts, and I mean the people out there, and there are people who didn't vote. They just didn't vote, saying, why should I bother? So it's not going to make any difference. Particularly in a local election, but in all elections, every vote makes a difference.
And not alone is it vital to vote, it's equally as important to make sure to keep voting down the list, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. Well, again, there are people who have their personal preferences as well, and they may not necessarily vote all the way down the list because they mightn't necessarily agree or like the particular candidate. But in terms of pure PR, and my late father, God be good to him, always said, in order for PR to work effectively, that you voted down the list. But having said that, I think it's an extraordinary achievement by Jerry Dolan, up against, a pretty well-oiled party machine in Sinn Féin. within the county, and I feel sorry for him in the sense that he's been an outstanding chairman of IFA. He has got an remarkable, enormous experience in the whole lot. But farmers are going to be represented in Leitrim County Council yet again by Jerry Dolan, and I'm sure that Martin has a reaction.
If we
to
could just
that
get some reaction from Martin Kinney. And Martin, thank you indeed for coming back to us. I suppose confirmation of it, we're expecting it for a while.
That's right.
Talk to me about it from a Pat Gillooly perspective. It has to be bitterly disappointing for him.
Of course it is bitterly disappointing for Pat. I mean, he put in a magnificent campaign, and overall, it's always disappointing when you come so close. I think you're better lose by 100. You're better lose by 100 votes than lose by 3 or 4. At least you're not going around counting who you could have got and who you could have seen. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a great success for Jerry Dolan, and due congratulations to him, as I said before.
Well, you have an opportunity to congratulate him. He's just after joining us here. Jerry Dolan, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Long-term councillor, vastly experienced politician at this stage. Tell me your thoughts on that particular campaign. You've done it again, Jerry. The great political survivor, they're calling you here this weekend. And you've really done it again. And you're supposed to, your ability to be transfer friendly, to pick up votes at any stage down the paper in any area, those are some of the big factors that has led to this success.
That's correct, John. I realise this time, above all times, that's very important to vote every person that's on it. 1, 2, 3, follow the line, because it went down to 7 or 8. It count this time. And I look forward to this challenge. I done my best. I canvassed nearly every house on my own. Those 2 days that my daughter and another lady canvassed one area, and my daughter and a man canvassed another area for a day. And apart from that, there may be houses I've missed, which I regret, that missed them by road, that I didn't pass them by or something in backward areas. But nevertheless, I done my best and I was successful in then. And I want to thank everyone, Mary and her staff here in the council. She done a tremendous job. They were so accurate, but I didn't doubt it any time. But they would have a very accurate count the first day yesterday, and it followed on today. And I want to thank yourself, John, and the media. And I want to thank my wife and family and in-laws. And I also want to thank especially all my supporters that helped me and attend the meetings and so forth, and has helped me for the last 5 years.
Tell me a little bit, take me back maybe to 3:30 this morning, coming on to 4 o'clock, and the decision was taken that we're going to be coming back for a recount. How did you feel then, or were you confident enough from being around? And I know you in years, Jerry, I know you're as shrewd when it comes to judging votes and predicting outcomes as anybody. Were you confident coming back in here this morning? Did you know the job was done?
Yes, I was confident coming in this morning. I was confident, and even though my son Oisin says, and so did John Ellis here, and a few, Martin, a few, and says that it could go anyway, but John says, keep your heart up. He says, you'll have it about 5 votes at the end of the day, and that was pretty early yesterday, middle of the day yesterday.
Pat Gillooly is obviously somebody no more than Fintan Cox who experienced a similar defeat here last night or early this morning as well. You have to feel for them, Jerry. It's such a devastating way to bow out.
Yes, I feel very sorry for anyone to lose out. Pat has lost the campaign, Dwyer of Shambo, Dennis O'Brien and Caroline Mulvey in this area. And I do feel sorry for them, but there'll be another day. I hope to see them back again in the field because, I hope. We'll see what will happen for myself in 5 years' time. I suppose I have youth on my side yet for another while.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jerry, tell me about the challenges that I suppose locally Drumshanbo posed this time round with so many candidates running in the field from that Drumshanbo area.
Yes, it was a big challenge. We had so many in Drumshanbo running. So all we could do was try and I went out and started a campaign, as they always did, a very clean campaign. I didn't run down any candidate. I canvassed my best. I never canvassed nobody for a number one in the last 28 years. All I asked was the best support possible on the day, because I feel it's the people's vote. There's no more intention to cast it at whatever position or whatever candidate they want. And that's what I did. And I got votes. And that's why I believe I got so many number 3s, 4, 5 down the line, because I didn't put pressure on no one for a number 1 or a number 4 or whatever the case was.
I think it's one of the remarkable stories of the local elections. Your popularity right across the region, and we were looking at transfers and where they were going. You were picking them up all over the place. I know we've mentioned the phrase transfer friendly, but again, it probably shows that you did the work in the entire constituency. You knocked on all the doors. You would have known a lot of people from your involvement in agriculture as well. But I suppose it goes to show, Jerry Dolan, networking is so important, isn't it?
It is very important. Well, I have known quite a lot of people now. There were very few people that I met, but they knew me. and has met me on different occasions or heard about me, and people says to me, I've seen your photo on the paper from presenting trophies in the mart and so forth, and I go out to help everybody. And the service I give, regardless what's to do with animals or people, I give a 24/7 service. And people has called me at all hours of the day and night. I never said no to nobody, and that's the way I intend to continue to do so. And the way I do run my council business is, people rings me if they have a problem. If I can't sort out on the phone, they're welcome to come to our house. I don't hold no clinics through the country. And if that doesn't suit, regardless where they are in the Ballamore municipal area, I go to their house in person and I take it from there. And that's what I've been doing since day in 91 when I was elected, and that's what I intended.
Finally, Jerry, and I'll let Martin or John or Pascal, if they have any comments to make, to come in after this. I can sense that the energy is there, the enthusiasm is there already. You're coming on the back of a real difficult campaign that was fought out to the very end, but I can see that enthusiasm and vigour. You're ready to go again.
I am, definitely. I hope, if God spares me, I'll be allowed to go ahead.
John Ellis?
Well, I think that we all know that the amount of energy that Jerry has shown in this campaign means that he's like the dog with the bone. He now has it and he won't let it go. And I think we have to admire him because he put in a tremendous campaign. I know people that have said to me, look, Jerry Dolan knocked on my door, and exactly what he said there. He said, he didn't ask me. He asked me, whatever you can do for me, I'd appreciate it. He didn't ask put pressure on people. And I think the one thing that's out there when it comes to dealing with the public, if you start to apply pressure, it will become negative. It doesn't matter what you're in, even if you're dealing with various groups, even dealing with public officials. If you give them a fair crack of the whip, you'll get a fair crack. But if you decide to put on pressure on somebody that is wrong, you will get the backlash. I think you won't work in your favour.
Martin, if you want a quick comment, because I know there's the other media commitments for Jerry, and thanks again for joining us so quickly here.
As Jerry was coming in the door, I was just congratulating him and say that the tremendous successes for him and his family, and after 28 years on the council, it really pays dividends, and that's seen here. I think Jerry, is a man of huge integrity, and he's going to be there for the next 5 years and maybe 5 more after that. But we look forward to working with him, and I'm sure the Oireachtas members and I'm sure everyone else will look forward to working with Jerry, as will all 18 new councillors on the council.
Well,
the best of luck to all of them.
Pascal, a word for your neighbour there.
Well, very briefly, of course, congratulations in order. And I've said it many times, a real vote-catching machine over 30 years, and it's been reflected yet again on the vote. And I have to say that he's also created a bit of history in that there are now 3 councillors in the Drumshanbo area, and I have no doubt that the 3 of them will continue to work in the best interest of the town and district, and indeed of the area, and want to wish Jerry and his family well.
Well done. Jerry, congratulations once again, and thank you indeed for joining us here on Ocean FM. Jerry Dolan.
Could I briefly, because I'm curious to get Martin's reply on this. I don't want to go 3 times into it about the talks.
Yeah, I thought I was getting away with that one. No, the talks are ongoing. They're difficult, and that's a reality. But there is, I think, a clink of light there, and I think there is progress been made. And the most recent report I heard from it was that it is very meaningful, and they're getting to the nitty gritty and to the heart of matters. And a lot of the stuff that needs to be dealt with is being dealt with. We still have a difficulty in I suppose, the British government and Brexit and what's all going on around there, and that is still posing some difficulty. But having said that, I think there is a very strong commitment to try and deliver on this. I would expect that we'd be looking at seeing the Assembly up and running again. Hopefully, I hope by the end of the summer into the autumn that you'll see that happening. Now, it will take some movement from everybody, but I think movement is there and can happen.
We were talking about the Greens and maybe the surge on support for the Greens and the issues of the environment before that count came in. And someone making the point today, Martin, that almost caught the main parties a little bit by surprise.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, nobody was expecting the Greens to surge the way they have. I mean, they have a handful of councillors yesterday around the country and have 2 Dáil deputies. But I mean, they really got a crest of a wave, and they went on top of it and have flown home. In many places around the country, we see Green councillors elected, but not just elected, but top on the poll and absolutely getting tremendous votes.
All right, Martin, thank you so much indeed. In the McGloin, congratulations. Welcome to the various media outlets of Ocean FM online and indeed on the FM frequency as well. First and foremost, congratulations. And 5 years ago, I remember interviewing you just down the corridor. It was a very different story. Just like Thomas Mulligan, another Fine Gael councillor in the Mohill area, you've come back, you've reclaimed your seat. Quantify the significance of the achievement, if you will.
Well, I suppose, look, it's always difficult to make a comeback. I see John leaving there. Many's the comeback he made when he lost the seat. So I'm sure he could give us a lesson or two on how to do it. But politics is a difficult game. It certainly is a challenging game. And as I said outside there, this is my 5th local election, winning 3, losing 2. I didn't know it was 2-2 up till now. So sometimes, you know, a man like you follows football, John, a 3-2 win can be an exciting time. So it has been an exciting time for me in politics, and I enjoy it. I suppose anyone that's in politics will tell you the greatest gratification you get out of it is trying to help people, trying to make their lives better, and trying to make communities better. And I suppose I was driven by that. I saw the opportunities. I suppose sometimes when your party is in government, you can see the opportunities to try and wield a bit of we call it lobbying influence to try and get them.
And that's one of the points that has been attributed maybe to your comeback, in the sense that although you weren't a councillor over the last 5 years, you have been accredited with a lot of positive developments, especially in Drumshanbo, on maybe on small, medium enterprises, on bringing business, on creating jobs, on securing funding, that a lot of that would have worked in your favour. But at the same time, that was probably hard work as well.
Well, it is. You know, I suppose I still remained involved in some of the community organisations in Drumshanbo, and I suppose probably the most prominent one is the Food Hub and the Drumshanbo Community Council. And I suppose it was lean years for a while. You know, you get breaks sometimes. I mean, we were for a long time 2/3 empty. We were coming out of the recession, and then suddenly you get a break. Someone like Pat Rigney comes along with an idea, and he's going to locate in Dublin. And at the time, I was just in the last 6 months of my time in the council, I remember saying to Joseph Galooly, you know, we've got to move on this. This man is 50-50. And in fairness to him and members of Leitrim County Council, they provided the type of assurances that he needed. And suddenly we say where it has come over those 4 years. So you can be lucky. And then in turn, when success breeds success, when, you know, the government obviously are sometimes justifiably criticised in terms of rural Ireland, but when they see the opportunity, when we sought funding twice for that particular project, we got it, and thirdly for another phase of it, you know, that it's really a combination of community and indeed government. And I think that there is a good community spirit in Drumshanbo. I was glad to be part of that, and I use that on occasions when I suppose the area I cover from Mayo up to Monaghan, I meet people like Heather Humphreys and Michael Ring, and sometimes you can just have a word in their ear about something. But I think I don't think we're getting something that we're not entitled to. I think it's a response to what the community themselves, you know, have led with. And I think it's all communities need to look at where they can source some
when you declared your intentions to contest the local elections, I remember doing an interview with you for the local news on Ocean FM on that particular day. One of the things that you identified was the number of candidates that would be running from the Drumshanbo area. Now, thankfully, I suppose there was a high turnout in vote, but a very, I suppose, astute vote management structure almost in Drumshanbo by the electorate there, in the sense that they've returned 3 councillors.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, I certainly did not predict that. I don't think anybody did. But I suppose some of the candidates, particularly Jerry Dolan, has a great ability to attract votes from outside of the area. And I suppose they're what they call leaky votes. I think I looked at it once. There's about 2,000 votes in the immediate Drumshanbo, Ballinaglara, Kilturbert area. There's 4,000 in the next, we'll call it, section. They put it be the old Ballinamore electoral area. So if you do the sums, it's 2 in one area, 4 in the other. And that's what happened in 14. So I suppose from the outset, anybody who had looked at it wouldn't have given Jerry the seat because of the way the figures were. But as I said to you, sometimes in parties one is constrained. You're told this is your area and you canvass that area. You don't go beyond that area. An independent candidate is different. They can actually head for the highways and the byways, and then when it comes to 6s and 7s, which you saw today played a huge part, then that comes in. And therefore, I think it's an anomaly that there's 3 seats in Drumshanbo, but I think that's the reason for the anomaly.
And finally, going forward into now, as regards, I suppose, your future with Fine Gael and as a councillor as well, something you'll hope to combine both roles?
Well, I suppose, yeah. Well, that's my hope. I suppose I won't have as much time for the job, and that's a matter for others to decide on. And certainly, like, I am committed to this role. I want to. There's be high expectations. There's a strong mandate now from the people of Drumshanbo and surrounding areas for me, and I have to live up to those expectations. I have to work hard, and I have to deliver. And I suppose in 5 years' time, people will judge me on my record, and that's the way politics works.
Well, congratulations once again, Pascal and Martin. I'll leave it over to you if you want to have any words.
No, just to, once again to formally congratulate. And we were talking earlier about Lazarus-like politicians, but I think you can apply the same to Enda. I mean, it was a bad day 5 years ago, and it's the nature of politics that suddenly the bad days, the clouds disappear, and it's a good day. And you're obviously going to enjoy it. I'd also, on a personal level, pass on our very best wishes to your dad, who I understand is not well and has been obviously adding a lot of extra pressure to you over the last few weeks, but at least you have this positivity about it. Just from the point of view of your future in Leitrim County Council, what do you see the priorities now in terms of, is it a case of much done and more to be done, or that steady as she goes?
Well, I think there's a number of issues. I mean, Martin himself here as a politician is raising the issue of one-off housing. I've come across it a good bit where, people generally who need to live or work in the rural countryside beside the farming or beside elderly parents or stuff like that, that is an issue. Martin has highlighted, he's put it up to the government. I think the government have to somehow deal with that in some way or form or other. I think that's something that I will be pressing them on the other side. Martin is pressing it on the opposition side, and that's certainly an issue that was very prevalent in the recent days. I think the other thing is, Pascal, is that I think we're living in a very, very good county. We have a huge quality of life positivity. Sometimes people, investors, and yourself, you're part of the same committee as I am, investors like to see places being talked up. Like, this town has improved. You think it when you first became a member of Leitrim County Council, Carrick-on-Shannon was a sleepy, one of the smallest county towns in Ireland. It has progressed significantly. Drumshanbo's progressed. There's other towns not so much. And there was mistakes made in the past about certain things, but I think there has to be sort of thinking outside the box in terms of the way some of our towns are. Some of them need some ideas. I think we need to look at. Possibly, you'd be shot if you said it sometimes, but certain around the tax incentive or something to rejuvenate accommodation, living accommodation within our towns, because as it stands presently, some of them, there's a lot of buildings which are needed renovation that could be people living in, there could be better use made of it. But I think something innovative has to happen, and I'd like to see Leitrim County Council at least examine it, putting proposals to government to see how that can be done, and maybe on a pilot basis we could get something rolled out in Leitrim. And I'd be happy to talk to Michael Ring about that if that ever was possible.
Well, first of all, to congratulate Enda and his whole team and family and everyone, because it is a big day for them, and there's, for the candidates that weren't successful today, there's a little sense of emotion there, and there's why and what and all that. But I mean, you have to get on with it. But for those who have been successful and have succeeded, there's great joy and enthusiasm. And I want to heartily congratulate Enda. He's a tremendous community worker. He's done tremendous work around Drumshanbo, and that's to be seen in the food hub and in many places in the area. And the one good thing is that now in Leitrim, we not only have a county council with somebody with a direct backdoor entrance to several ministers that will be able to bring money into every corner of the county.
More pressure. No pressure.
And just seeing messages coming in there. Shannon, next stop.
Oh, no. I tell you, Pascal Mooney will write a book on the Shannon. And I'd say...
We've shared our thoughts on that.
Yes. And I've been down that road twice, and I have no wish. I'm so glad to be back in this job. And as I said, I have a lot of work to do, a lot of expectations to live up to. And look, that's my priority for the moment.
Okay, well, look at it. Well done. Congratulations to you, to all your family. You know what it's like, both sides of the divide. It's a 3-2 ratio. Welcome back to Leitrim County Council.
Can I just say, sorry, in real conclusion, to congratulate them. I know it's been said 100 times, but I'd like to say to congratulate yourselves, Ocean FM, Kevin, our neighbour over there, and all of the team. I mean, as I said, everybody needs to understand how their vote works, and I think the local media coverage of this gives people that understanding. That's important to keep democracy alive, and that people don't dismiss their vote as if it's a non-event. It is a very important event, and it's nice to see democracy. And I think the media media here has given that, shone a light on all of that. So congratulations to you.
Thank you indeed, and very kind words, and good luck over the next 5 years. Thank you so much indeed. That's Enda McGlynn joining us here in our studio in the Bush Hotel. And gentlemen, I think that more or less has wrapped it up. We'll leave the final word to Pascal Mooney on it. Thank you so much, Pascal, for all your help, to Francie and to Kevin for playing a huge part, and Brian, to all our crew here. It's been a magnificent couple of days. Final word to you, Pascal.
I just want to thank you, John, for anchoring this marathon session. I agree with what Enda has said, that it's been important that the media has been here and that we've been here to try and explain as best we can how the process works, and that hopefully that we'll do our own little bit in enhancing democracy. And to say to all of the candidates, those who are successful, they're now going to be wearing the jersey for LEITRIM into the next 5 years, and we wish them well. To those who didn't make it on this occasion, particularly those that came close and fell at the last hurdle, let's hope that by law Ella Mahagat.
And that ends 25 hours of broadcast coverage from the Bush Hotels on local elections 2019. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Until we meet again, bye-bye for now.
Thanks very much. I was trying to keep an eye on things around the country, and nobody, not everywhere as good as yourselves. Mary, thanks for everything.
Thank you for all your help, to Francie and to